hands. I think you two are, Caroline and Megan, I think you're still co-hosts. You might need to be able to let people in.
I'm going to give it back to you once the stream goes through.
Awesome.
I'm going to give it back to you once the stream goes through.
Awesome. Very good. Thank you.
I'm going to give it back to you once the stream goes through.
Oh, thank you.
I'm going to give it back to you once the stream goes through.
Oh.
Make sure you can share your screen, John.
You've disabled that. Thanks for asking that. I might need to be a co-host.
Technical difficulties. Hold on. Megan is now the host. Megan, see if you can make John a host.
So I can make John a host. Do you want me to make him a host or a co-host?
Co-host.
Okay, great.
All right. Thank you for taking over, and congratulations on getting through our first glitch. Take it from here. Have a good one.
John, do you want to test and see if your screen sharing works, or we'll just?
Yep, I think we're good. I think
Okay.
though, Megan, you'll need to record.
Well, thank you also those that are joining. We're going to give it a few minutes to let some people trickle in, and then we'll go ahead and get started. While all of you are waiting in the chat, if you have access to the chat and you want to let us know where you guys are from or how you got to us today, that would be great. But we're excited to meet all of you, and we'll probably give it 2 more minutes and then we'll go ahead and get started. Well, I'll say that we'll go ahead and get started. As I'm sitting here, I feel like I've just waited 10 minutes and it's been maybe 90 seconds. So we'll go ahead and get started, be respectful of everyone's time. Thank you all for coming today and for being here. And for those that are watching us on live stream, my name is Caroline Ricca. I'm one of the members of SCORE Ohio. And I figure I would start by telling us all just a little bit about SCORE Ohio and how we got started. So SCORE Ohio stands for Second Chance Opportunities for Restorative Employment. We are a coalition of partners here in the Central Ohio area, whose goal is to create awareness about certifications and opportunities that benefit both employers and employees. And specifically, we look at justice-involved citizens. We strive to help overcome the stigmas surrounding employers and their views on restored citizens, and sharing the positive impact that hiring this population can have for the workforce. So we started in, I think, 2018. That was a little dicey, 2017 or 2018 when we first started. But we got together with an idea in mind. And since then, we have representatives from the Legal Aid Society of Columbus. We have Franklin County Public Health, the Education Service Center of Central Ohio, me that just kind of floats around to different places. And then we've also got some other community partners as well. And we have hosted, I think, 9 events. This is our maybe 9th event in that time, which is really exciting. So we spread the word over the last 4 or 5 years to hundreds of employers and social justice advocates. So with that, John, I don't know if I missed anything in our little opening remarks, but I'm happy to have you all here and listening and open to the communication and what we have to say. So I will pass that over to John, and thanks again for being here.
Caroline, thank you so much for sharing a bit of a background. For those viewing today that might have some unfamiliarity with SCORE Ohio and our mission of better connecting our justice-involved community members into meaningful employment. I'm humbled today to be your moderator for this conversation, and I'm very grateful to say that we have Attorney Megan Odell, the Honorable Gina Russo, Craig Stewart, and Jeff Anthony joining us today for this conversation to kind of share more about what a certificate of qualification for employment is, the impact and process of that CQE, and then really the nuts and bolts of it. What does that mean for quality and meaningful employment in the community? I'm going to ask each of our panelists if they'd please introduce themselves. Megan, please, I'd like to start with you.
Great, thank you, John. My name is Megan Odell. I am with Ohio State Legal Services Association, and I am a member of SCORE Ohio, as you can see from my lovely background. I've previously worked as a public defender, representing folks here in Franklin County. I've also worked as an advocate and a lobbyist, working at the State House to remove barriers to employment and occupational licensing for folks with criminal records. So this issue is very important to me, and I appreciate you all being here.
Fantastic. Thank you, Megan. Judge Russo, if you'd be so kind to introduce yourself.
Yes, good afternoon, and thank you, John, and to SCORE Ohio for having me here today. My name is Judge Gina Russo. I am currently a sitting judge on the Franklin County Municipal Court. I have been here since March of 21. Prior to that, I did serve as a judge on the Franklin County Court of Common Pleas for 2 years. Prior to that, I served as a assistant Franklin County prosecuting attorney for 7 years. And then prior to that, I was a civil litigator for 10. So I'm coming up on my 20-year anniversary of working my professional career. And I am happy to say that I've worked on all sides, both on the defense side, the prosecution side, and now as judge. In my tenure as being a judge for the last 3 years, I have worked and really promoted a lot of reentry programs. I do go around our county and participate in various expungement clinics and reentry programs, talking about the need and the importance of expungement and Cqes and returning to meaningful employment. Thank you. I'm happy to be here today.
Great. Thank you, Judge Russo. Thank you so much. Craig Stewart.
Thanks, John. My name is Craig Stewart. I'm the Chief Human Resource Officer for Integrated Services for Behavioral Health. I am also a member of the SCORE Coalition, and I am excited to be here to help speak to you about Cqes and their importance in the workplace. I've been a longtime advocate for individuals with Cqe, especially as we look to find the best employees that we can in this tight labor market. This is something that really makes sense for individuals, both that are looking with their Cqe and for employers. And so I could talk a little bit more later today about what the impact is for employers and those individuals.
Excellent. Thanks for being here today. Jeff Anthony, I tell you what, I'm so grateful you're here and representing your organization. If you be so kind, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks, John, and thanks to SCORE for hosting us and having us here. My name is Jeff Anthony. I'm with Performance Columbus. We're an auto dealer throughout Central Ohio. We have 7 locations throughout Central Ohio, and really what a lot of my work is focused on external relations and building those community partnerships and working with the community to be able to help lift up Central Ohio as a whole. And that's why we're really excited to be a part of this. And also, like Craig said, really being focused on that employer perspective. And it's something that we've really put a focus on in terms of working with individuals that have been justice involved and being able to give them an opportunity. And so it's going to be great to be part of the conversation and excited to talk and quite frankly, learn more too.
Outstanding. Thanks so much, Jeff. And so the name of this particular program is, SCORE Ohio. And, what's a Cqe? There are some nuts and bolts for you involved in this conversation and viewing this conversation. And we brought a subject matter expert, attorney Megan Odell, to kind of share more about what a Cqe is, eligibility for a Cqe, and a few other finite questions we're going to ask along the way. So Megan, I turn it over to you.
Great, thanks, John. Well, first I'm going to share my screen. I have a Cqe brochure that I'd like to share with you all. Let's see. Can you all can see that, right? Okay. Awesome. So yeah, so let's start it off. And I will say real quick, this one pager is in the virtual folder that Caroline has posted in the chat. You will have access to that. So, you can come back to this at any point in time. So I guess, John, should I just get started with the basics? Do you have questions? Or
I think, first let's share with the audience what a Cqe is. I mean, it's a great acronym, but what does it stand for and what does it mean?
Great. So a Cqe is a certificate of qualification for employment. So there are over 850 barriers to employment and occupational licensing in the law for folks who have criminal records. And a Cqe is a certificate that will actually lift these barriers, these mandatory barriers in the law. So what it does is it creates a rebuttable presumption that an individual's record alone is not disqualification for employment or occupational licensing. And
would you care to share more? Maybe like what are some of the big barriers that the Cqe is lifting?
Yes. So as I said, all of those barriers in the law, those 850 barriers to employment. So for example, if you are trying to become a social worker or a cosmetologist or a peer support counselor, for example, those licensed occupations. And the law says, hey, if you've got a theft on your record, you cannot apply for this license, or at least, you can't apply for this license in the next 5 years. So the CQE will actually lift that barrier so that you can apply for that license or employment.
And can you talk a little bit more for us here about eligibility for the CQE, please?
Yeah. And so let's see. I can scroll down a little bit. Here's some more info for you all. So in terms of eligibility, the CQE is only going to cover eligible Ohio offenses. So unfortunately, it does not cover out-of-state offenses. It doesn't cover federal offenses. There is a waiting period to apply for a CQE. So for a felony, if you're trying to get a CQE for a felony that you have to wait 1 year after final discharge. For a misdemeanor, it's 6 months after final discharge. And final discharge means after all fines have been paid, your probation is over, you've done, community service, any incarceration time, whatever your sentence is, so long as that is complete, then the clock starts ticking. Now, there are some exceptions to this, including if you can get approval from your probation officer, or if you have already completed a CAE while you were incarcerated, then you can apply. You don't have to, wait the year or the 6 months.
And so those that have gone through the CAE process, can you share what that is for our viewers?
So the CAE, it's Certificate of Achievement and Employability. So that is actually a program through our prisons. So I don't believe that that is offered in our county jails. I think just because the thought is that you spend less time in county jail than you do in our prisons. So that's a program through when you have kind of a longer sentence to be able to complete that.
Excellent. And I think there's a connection happening amongst our participants. My next question was going to actually be, what career fields have CQEs been granted? And Allison has come in with a question about CQEs having an impact, maybe with the accountancy board, engineering, electrician board. She's kind of curious about these multiple industries that a CQE can impact.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So CQEs have been granted, it's really been across the boards. The Department of Medicaid, for example, there is a requirement for folks with records to have a CQE to obtain a Medicaid billing number. So a lot of folks who are billing Medicaid, for example, have gotten their CQEs. But boards, if we're talking about boards, the social worker board, the Board of Education, for example, has granted CQEs for folks who want to be, a barber or cosmetologist. Certainly our peer support counselors, those folks have been granted CQEs.
Outstanding, thank you. And there may be employers on the call here that may have hired as a fair chance employer. How can they verify if someone holds a CQE?
Yes, so you can verify the accuracy of a CQE on the ODRC website. And I believe I've got that website. So, and this is actually the ODRC CQE website. It's just drc.ohio.gov/CQE. And there is a long list of folks who have been granted CQEs on there.
And you talked about how a petitioner has to have, make amends, financial, otherwise. And so as they explore this as an option, what's the cost for a petitioner to go through a CQE process?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, the cost is supposed to be, I mean, the financial cost is supposed to be $50. It's supposed to be capped at $50. And so that's what you should be seeing throughout the state. It should be $50.
Outstanding. Thank you. Paulina's come in to ask about the relationship with CQEs and applying for housing.
Yeah, so, and we have had conversations. I know folks throughout the state, certainly in Central Ohio, have had conversations about some type of CQH. So some type of certificate of qualification for housing. I don't believe that exists. You know, it certainly, if an individual wants to take their CQE to a landlord and say, hey, you know, I have this certificate, but it's not legally binding for housing. The intent behind the CQE was to remove barriers for in the law for employment and occupational licensing. So it's directly tied to employment, but it may be, you know, it may certainly be helpful for folks looking for housing.
Fantastic. And again, Megan, you mentioned that more information is on the ODRC website.
Yes.
To look at current CQE holders. And this document is housed in the link that Caroline put in earlier, that I think that she'll probably post that link again to our virtual resource link for folks. Megan, I really appreciate you sharing more of really what a CQE is and what that process is. Hang tight, there's some more questions coming your way, but I'd like now to talk with Judge Russo, please. You know, Judge, you had mentioned, you know, your years of experience on the bench issuing CQEs. Can you share a little bit about, you know, what your view is on CQE and what your mentality and belief is in reviewing a CQE petitioner?
Absolutely, and thank you for that question. You know, my years of experience working as a government lawyer and then becoming a judge, the one thing that was so impactful on everyone's lives is getting them back to meaningful employment. So I do believe that law-abiding, healthy, productive lives begin with having a healthy routine. And that really starts with becoming employed, being able to take care of yourself and your family members and being able to provide. So I've always been a proponent of getting people back to work in whatever way that we can do, whether that be through expungement or through the CQE process. So I always look at it from a place of, I'm going to grant this unless there's some glaring overarching reason why I shouldn't. So when we receive a petition, the court will then undertake its own investigation, and that's usually done by our probation department. So we will get all the information in addition to obviously what's included in the petition itself, but we will do a very thorough criminal history background check, and the other counties in which there's other convictions, if there are any, those counties will likewise be notified that a petition or a CQE request for a CQE has been filed. The prosecutor is able to file an objection. Most of the times when I got a CQE request, the prosecutors would defer. That happened in a large percentage of the cases that I saw, meaning that there was no objection at all. They would give it to the court, and the court in its own discretion could determine whether or not that person was going to be get the CQE. After the thorough investigation, which again is typically conducted by our probation department, the court then has 60 days to rule on the petition. So we like to keep these things moving so that they don't get lost in the shuffle. What I will say is this CQE process started in 2012. I was a judge on the Franklin County Common Pleas from 2019 and 2020. I was more disappointed at that point that I wasn't seeing more. And in fact, I started in my sentencings, in any time I had a hearing, I would tell people about the availability of CQEs, because I think half the battle is getting the word out and having people know about this. And that's why I'm so thankful that SCORE Ohio is now involved and is shouting this from the rooftops, because I think if people know more, they'll utilize it more. So I think it's a fantastic tool, and I hope people begin to use it more.
Fantastic. And we really also respectfully appreciate you being a champion, both as an issuer and then also just for other proponents of, hey, this is something that you should be doing. Can you help for maybe those that are viewing that are considering to petition for their CQE? What would be, kind of tools to success as they go in front of the probation officer before they get to you? What from you reviewing petitioners' cases, what will help them?
That's a good question. So the standard that is set by the court when we look at all of this, so that investigation comes in, we're looking at the things that the petitioner, he or she themselves, that they want us to know. We're looking at the prior court contacts. But then we consider that petition, and what we're looking at, we have to find by a preponderance of the evidence, which again is a different standard than the actual underlying conviction. The underlying conviction is a much higher burden. It's the beyond a reasonable doubt. To apply for a CQE, it's a lesser burden on the petitioner. It's by a preponderance of the evidence that granting the CQE will materially assist the petitioner in obtaining employment or occupational licensing, that the petitioner has a substantial need for the requested relief in order to live a law-abiding life, and 3, that the CQE would not pose an unreasonable risk to the safety of the public or any individual. So what I was always looking at was, number 1, this person actually took the proactive steps to better themselves in their lives. So that's already a positive. I'm looking to see whether this will materially assist this person in obtaining employment, because that should be our goal too, is to help these people get back into a meaningful employment to provide for themselves and their family. The substantial need, so I'm looking at what were the collateral consequences of the underlying conviction. What is the impediment to employment? What is the problem here? And whether this person would pose an unreasonable risk. And if I'm not finding any problems with that, then I will almost always go ahead and grant the CQE. There is a rebuttable presumption that the CQE should be granted. And this is and this is a timing issue. If it's 1 year after all of the final sanctions, or 3 years if it's a felony. So 1 year if it's a misdemeanor, and 3 years. And then if it's the CQE request was properly filed. So there is a rebuttable presumption in favor of the petitioner. And so that also helps courts utilize their discretion in getting these things approved and people getting onto their lives.
Outstanding. I'm going to go off script for just a moment and ask, was there a particular case that was before you that you knew that this CQE issuance really had an opportunity to change this individual's life? Was there something that you'd like to share in particular that really made an impact to you?
So I was looking back, because I did keep kind of a list of the CQEs that I did grant over the time that I was there. I wouldn't say that there was one in particular, but what I will say is the typical theme is that we all make mistakes in our lives, and you can tell the trajectory of someone's life. So there was one individual, I think it was the last one that I granted, since he had made his mistake and was court and justice involved. It was 6 years. He had gotten married, had 2 children, bought a home, but he wasn't able to find gainful employment. And I'm like, well, how do you do all of these wonderful things? And that there's still this one impediment to you returning to a job, and a job that you would love. And it was just a no-brainer. So the CQE was granted, it was approved, and he was able to finally get a job, and he circled back to the court, and he was very, very thankful and overcome with emotion that had happened. So we see that a lot. And so we just need to remove those impediments and allow people to get back to work.
Awesome. I'm sure the mutual gratitude of being involved in that process is pretty impactful. On a logistical question, are CQEs a permanent certificate? And if they are, can they be revoked for any particular reason?
Yes, so they are. Once the court grants it, you have your CQE and you can utilize it. The way that they can be revoked is if you are either you plead guilty or you're convicted of a felony subsequent to its issuance. So again, if you have those convictions prior, those will be taken into account, into consideration when the judge grants it. The only way it would be revoked is if you do pick up a subsequent felony.
Judge Russo, again, thank you so much for your commitment to our community and the multiple roles that you've had, and I know that you continue to have in our community. So thank you so much. Thank you for being here. There might be a follow-up question here, but you mentioned that really the impact that this has on an individual, and you've seen that in person. For our attending audience, we have a video of a CQE holder, and I tell you, one thing that I think many of us have experienced in our lives is when we see that testimonial of someone going through something and coming out to the other side. So if you'll please bear with us, I'm going to show you a video of a CQE holder that went through the process with our SCORE Ohio team, and I'm going to turn the video over to Alicia Bachner.
Program called the Restoration Academy. Through that program, I was introduced to the resource of being able to file for a CQE. That process was amazing to me because they actually sat down and taught me and told me about what I was doing. It wasn't just, hey, come do this. And they actually walked me through the process, which was very helpful, which is very helpful to people that don't understand kind of what's going on or don't know how to fill out the paperwork. It is a sense of relief where you have someone that's helping you walk through. So with my life coach position, my life experience has helped me. I work with the children. I do have the ability to work with adults also. But even in some of my job positions, it allows me to help people that believe they're stuck, and sometimes we got to help people get unstuck, and I was once one of those people. So it allows me to utilize what I've learned to teach others, because sometimes people have the resources, they just don't know how to get there, and I am a true servant. So within true servantship, it is my duty to help other people, and that's why I like social work. It is not an easy process. It does take steps. It allows the person to also look at some of the things that might have been part of their past, and also to remember that those things are part of their past, but also that it does not have to affect their future or their present. And so also, because of the process, because you have to fill out the paperwork, you have to send it to a certain entity, the ODRC has to come back. That also allows for that employer to see, hey, this went through a certain amount of change of commands, and hey, it wasn't easy for this person to stick through it and go through it. So also the joy of even going through the paperwork and sticking with it is also a joy, because it's like a change. It's like it's something that I put my mind to. It was something that I worked hard on. It was something that I had to follow up on. I had to do the work. The employer should look at the rigorous time and effort that it took for the person to do that. And I think also it is very important for the employers to be knowledgeable about the process of the CQE, that it's just not a proper paper that you can just write and say, hey, I just want to get my record clean. That's not how it works. And also a judge has to look rigorously through these paperwork or through these records and things that this person is bringing in to prove to themselves that they've changed. So it's not just an application and you go in there and the judge say, hey, yeah, I'm going to grant it. It is something that it has to be looked at from different entities, including the ODRC, to allow this person to have the CQE. But for me personally, it allowed me to know that I didn't give up on myself and that I can accomplish anything that I want to accomplish, and it allowed me to be resilient, to keep fighting for what I want. So now it's amazing when I sign up for college or I get a job and I can just be like, hey, can you give me a recommendation? And these are people that know that I've done the work and know that I've changed and know I'm worthy of that recommendation. So for me, yes, it is wonderful to have a CQE. I feel like I'm a superwoman.
Apologies for any glitches on the video aspect, but I think we were able to hear the testimonial of Alicia's process, the obstacles she overcame, the persistence with the process, and then her coming out on the other side. and self-attesting that she is a superwoman. So that was fantastic. Well, she made an important point there, really the relationship with the employer. And so we're real fortunate today to have two Central Ohio employers with us today, Craig Stewart and Jeff Anthony. And they both are advocates for fair chance employment. And Craig, I'm going to start with you, please. Could you talk a bit about, what through your lens, the advantage of both engaging with as being a fair chance employer, and in fact, the hiring process you have for hiring a CQE holder?
I'd love to. So I think first and foremost, when you are looking at CQE holders, you are opening yourself up as an employer to a whole new pool of applicants that many other employers shy away from. And it gives you an opportunity to really reach that pool of candidates or potential candidates for your open positions that otherwise may be overlooked because their abilities are overshadowed by their justice involvement. And so being able to open up your pool of candidates greatly helps you as an employer to find great employees who are going to help you be successful in whatever business that you are operating. I think the other piece of that, you were talking about what have we found with candidates. They're typically very motivated, very dedicated, and they are driven to succeed in what they are doing. And I think both Judge Russo and Megan spoke to the fact that this is a process. And these folks have willingly undertaken this process to say, I want to get back into a more normal subset of life from what you would consider their previous situation. And so I personally have seen individuals with CQEs come in and be very successful in whatever position that they hold. And from an employer standpoint, just talking about kind of our process, while my specific area and industry requires us to ask the question, have you previously been convicted of a felony? Because we are a Medicaid billing operation, we ask our employers to take that with a grain of, our supervisors and our managers and our recruiters to take that with a grain of salt. Because we know that there are options and that there are ways that we can employ these individuals. And so while that is on the application, my conversation with them is that we need to look past that and ask more questions and learn more about these individuals and their experiences, because that's going to tell us so much more than a box on a piece of paper.
And your hiring process with a CQE holder, are they self-attesting to holding this certificate, or is that through discovery of the interview, or is it post? How has that conversation happened with your? Oops, I think I went on mute. Sorry about that. When you're hiring your justice involved person that has a CQE, how is that conversation had? Is it at the front? Are they self-attesting that, hey, they hold the certificate? Is it kind of uncovered during the interview, or is it post-interview and they say, hey, by the way, I've got the job and I happen to also be a CQE holder?
It's happened all three of the ways that you've described.
Yeah.
And certainly it is much easier for us to move forward in the process if we know up front that somebody is a CQE holder. Then we can have some open and honest discussions about their employment and what that might look like. If someone comes to us on the back end, oftentimes we've already started the pre-employment processes that we're required to do. And then we come back to them for a conversation, and then they say, oh, hey, by the way, I have this. And so we're open to accepting both. Again, we're looking for the best candidate, and that includes individuals who have been justice involved in the past, CQE or not. The CQE, as Megan spoke to earlier, just allows them to do different things than someone who may be justice involved but has not taken that extra step. We have an independently licensed social worker and a licensed chemical dependency counselor on staff, both who have CQEs, both who can bill Medicaid, and both who otherwise right now would be in an exclusionary period to do so if it weren't for that CQE. And so it changes the conversation, not just because we can employ them, but we can employ them in a different fashion.
Very impactful there. Jeff, in the automotive industry and specifically with Performance Columbus, how is the approach for your organization as you are embracing and being a fair chance employer here in Central Ohio?
Yeah, that's a great question, John. And I'd echo a lot of what everyone else has said here, in particular as it relates to CQE. I think Judge Russo said it very well in saying it's the individual taking a proactive step. So it gives that employer a peace of mind. And specifically at Performance Columbus, we've been working with community partners as well as, most specifically drug courts in terms of providing justice-involved individuals with opportunities. And kind of out of that, we birthed a program called Higher 60, which in part works with individuals that have been in recovery or have gone through drug court or have been in justice-involved situation, as well as other individuals. And really, regardless of their technical automotive skills, we provide them with an opportunity in training, and we provide training 4 days a week, 2 hours in the classroom, 2 hours in a lab-based environment. And then we also have them go out to our stores for the remainder of the day. So it provides a lot of structure to the individuals and also gives them an opportunity to earn money while they're learning. It's at no cost to them. And so it provides them kind of that platform to be able to build into a career, and it really has the longitudinal growth potential that the individual seeks to provide that stability. So that's a big thing we do, and really it all comes down to just like with Craig and with most employers, it comes down to company culture and really having a focus on that, and having a focus. We really focus on having respect for our fellow employees, as well as obviously customers as well, and then trust and honesty is a big part of that. And so kind of cultivating that culture with these individuals is extremely impactful. And through that Higher 60 program, in our last class, we had 2 justice-involved individuals, and one of them did a testimonial for us and said, look, I don't know where life would be if I wasn't given this opportunity. And so on one hand, it's, you wonder how many people haven't been given that opportunity. And on the other hand, it's about providing those opportunities as an employer, to be able to give them that chance to really be a law-abiding and contributing citizen to the community, Central Ohio at large. And so that's why it's important to have that conversation and really some of the steps that we're taking in terms of further engagement.
I love it. And you talked about growth and opportunity, and really, and that testimonial the individual gave, very impactful. The reality too is that sometimes, there are opportunities and there are challenges, as an employer when engaging, with justice-involved applicants. Can you, Jeff, kind of share some of the challenges you've had as an employer, and then how you maybe overcome those?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, there have been great successes, but there certainly are some challenges, and in particular in the automotive industry, because individuals are dealing with customers' cars and just numerous cars, literally hundreds of cars on a daily basis. Insurability and having licensure is extremely important, and that is a barrier that we have faced. And justice-involved individuals have sometimes, whether they've had revocation of license or if the driving record just wasn't clean enough, that does provide some challenges. And really that comes down to the insurance side of things. That's not really our call. The insurance provider just says they simply won't cover it. And so it makes it, it is a significant barrier. The one other thing I'd mention too, from an employer perspective, and I think it's why it's so great that we're having a Central Ohio Reentry Week and everything that SCORE Ohio does is, as an employer, it can be very challenging. You always have a million things going on. And so being able to identify the justice-involved individuals and really being able to provide, start that dialogue and communication with those individuals can sometimes seem cumbersome. And so that's why this is so important. So, you know, it's something as we've kind of dove deeper into this process, we've learned more, and it's been a tremendous opportunity as an employer. And so I know we're very grateful for that. And I think that it's something that employers as a whole can benefit from, because as Craig mentioned, you know, everyone's heard labor shortages and everything of the sort. And though that is a critical piece, the one thing I'd add to that is also the macro cultural component of what that does for the community at large, and how that helps people to be able to be contributing members, and really like the individual that Judge Russo had granted that had gone in to buy a house, and to give them that opportunity for a new pathway is just critically important.
Fantastic. And Craig, I am sure working in healthcare, Medicaid, and employment in this community and in this time of labor shortage, I'm sure there are very low opportunities and low challenges. I'm sure you've got a trifecta of wins. But then you add in the component too of our justice involved, you know, trying to work with records and things. What are some of the challenges that you have been able to overcome for this process?
I think the biggest thing is stigma. And you still have a lot of individuals out there who are unsure about the CQE process, about the standards that are used in granting someone a CQE, and the criminal past. And I think the biggest thing for people to understand is it's not really about the criminal past. It's about the due diligence that's done through this process, both through the court system and by an employer, to make sure that they're hiring an individual that's going to be a good fit for that organization. You know, one thing that I've been asked about in HR circles is about negligent hiring practices. And certainly there is a concern when you hire anyone that there could be some type of negligence on the employer's part, that something happens later on in their employment. But I think the biggest thing to note here is that with the CQE, there is a presumption of due care if the employer is aware of that, right? And we are able to point to that, hey, this doesn't necessarily connect to anything that happens through their employment. And so it's not a concern that people should focus on. In fact, you know, we talk to our folks about the importance in our profession about having lived experience. And as we have individuals that we bring on board with lived experience, they can better help navigate these systems for others that are having similar experiences. And so we really talk about it from a cultural perspective, as Jeff was talking about, and how this can positively impact the outcomes that we have, both for us as an organization, for these individuals that we're hiring, and those that we're trying to serve.
I love it. And so you took that approach of your peers, right? And other human resource professionals, talent acquisition professionals, C-suite professionals on the challenges and relaying and knocking down the stigma. What advice would you give to the justice involved citizen, the petitioner, the person who's looking for that opportunity right now? What advice would you give them?
Just be strong and talk about the skills that you can bring. Certainly the stigma is real, and there will be challenges, and they just have to understand that. But if they are consistent and they continue to show themselves in their best light and talk about the positive things that they can bring to an employer through their skills and knowledge, they will persevere. And so they just need to continue to push, and eventually they'll find the right place for both them and the employer.
I love it. So we've talked about, you know, the decision makers, and then we've talked about the job seeker. Can you help me, Craig? And then Jeff, I'll go to you next. But how are you engaging with your supervisors, right, and your direct report managers on how they engage and the practices they should have when hiring, training, and developing our justice involved applicants?
Complete transparency. We treat individuals with a CQE the same as we would any other individual that we hire. We don't see that as being any different than any other person that we bring into the organization. We onboard them the same, we treat them the same, and we respect them in the same ways that we would anyone that we employ. And so we speak with our supervisors and our hiring managers about that and help them to understand that these individuals are successful and skilled and can do the work that we're hiring them to do. And that's the way that we want them to be seen, both for our organization, outside of our organization, and across the communities that they serve.
I love it. Thank you. And Jeff, through your Hire 60 program and the training managers that you have there, is there a certain conversation that you're having with those training managers, hiring managers on embracing our justice-involved job seekers?
Yeah, absolutely. And, for example, in particular in the Hire 60 program, our instructors for that program are, one of the key components of that is the company culture and also direct mentoring of the individuals to help guide them. And to kind of piggyback on what Craig had said, really in terms of, because those individuals do go out to the 7 stores, they're working with different hiring managers. And so at the, within the company, we've really communicated with those hiring managers the necessity to understand potentially some of the barriers that an individual may face, something that kind of going back to what I was saying in terms of licensure, that someone may have transportation barriers, or also that, there potentially could be some additional barriers that lengthen the hiring process. So patience is key on that. And then lastly, understanding that individual may be adapting to a new environment. And so that kind of goes hand in hand with really the cultural significance and importance of the hiring manager, but also in terms of direct supervisor, working alongside that individual to be able to really build that relationship and provide mentorship through the process, both through the onboarding process. Day one for us, doesn't matter if you're a manager or what position you're taking. Day one is always in cultural training, and then from there, it's really embracing and getting yourself involved within that too. And one other thing I would touch on too, in terms of the job seeker, really looking at that. One thing, and I keep harping on it, but as you're doing research for potential opportunities, really doing research on that company, whether it's on their website or their social media, and understanding what their core values are, and seeing if there's an alignment in that process. Because that is always going to be something that's very valuable. It's going to mean a lot to the employer, but it's also going to let you know if that makes sense as a fit too. Because like Craig said, everyone's treated as any other applicant would be. And so, we really communicate with our hiring managers that look, individuals may have different lived experiences, but you have to provide the opportunity and a pathway to kind of alter the trajectory. So that's kind of the process that we take in terms of communicating with our hiring managers.
Awesome. Thank you. Jeff, Performance Columbus has a significant footprint in the region, multiple dealerships. Craig, Integrated Health, has multiple locations also around the region. For someone viewing this, that whether they're justice involved or not, how should they advocate for themselves and kind of cheer them on as they want to engage in a hiring process with your organization? Jeff, I'll start with you, and then Craig will finish with you.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, that Cqes process is really important because, it does provide a demonstration of that due diligence. And so I think it's something that is very significant. The other thing too is, let the employer know when you're going through that process, perhaps some of the barriers, particularly, if you have transportation, like you said, we have dealerships throughout Central Ohio, and so we've encountered it with individuals that have said, they may be out, for example, in Lancaster, but they're applying at a store, one of our stores on Morris Road, and it helps us to identify maybe how we can remove some of those barriers or reduce some of those barriers. And then again, from our perspective too, from the auto industry perspective is, also going going beyond, and if you have had licensure revocation, in terms of driving license, I mean, and if you have any challenges or barriers with that, working towards eliminating those barriers, seeking out assistance to be able to find out how those can be eliminated. We do work with individuals to try and eliminate those barriers as best as we can, but it's something that can provide some difficulty from our perspective. And so anyway, you are able to mitigate those and obviously work with the employer throughout the hiring process, and being transparent and being honest. It makes it much easier for us because again, that's a core principle. And so it's not something that it's not a disqualifier in any way. In fact, that honesty, quite frankly, can help to break down any potential, like Greg said, any stigmas or anything to that extent. So that's kind of the approach with the hiring process in terms of how a job seeker could really advocate for themselves and kind of demonstrate the work they've done.
Thank you. Craig.
Yeah. Sorry. So it's similar to what Jeff was saying, right? Just be open and be honest and be transparent. And we as employers who see CQE holders as individuals that we want to employ, we want to help you eliminate those barriers. And we can't do that if you don't work with us and talk to us and help us to understand that you are ready to be employed with us and you are willing to be employed. And so I think just to sum it up, very similar to what Jeff said, if you can include your CQE certificate when you are uploading your resume into our webpage or via any of the job sites that you may be able to apply through, that's helpful. And also just during the conversations, just share, hey, I've got the CQE. And that changes a little bit of the conversation about how we can move things forward. And so it's just important to share that information and be open and honest. And again, just be supportive of yourself, right? If you are a CQE holder, know that you are wanted and you are valuable, both in the community and to employers, and you need to continue to advocate for yourself.
Craig and Jeff, thank you so much for being here in this conversation. From the employer perspective, you are making an impact to the individual, their families, and their respective communities. So thank you for that. We have about 5 minutes or so left of our event. Please, if there are any questions for Megan, Judge Russo, Craig, or Jeff, please feel free to put that in the chat. You'll also see in the chat that we've put a Google Drive link that houses a variety of resources, including that document that Megan shared earlier on what a CQE is and the process of getting a CQE. And then also, if you have any direct questions, you can email to scoreohio1 at gmail.com. Please feel free to do that. Any closing remarks? Megan, Judge Russo, Craig, or Jeff?
Well, I just want to say, John, thank you for having us, and thank you all for being here.
I want to echo that, what Megan, thank you for having us. I think that these events are crucial because I think the more that we can get the word out to people, like I said, being a judge, I didn't see nearly as many CQE requests that I would have liked to have seen. Hopefully that's increasing and will continue to increase after events like this. Thank you.
Likewise, thank you for having us on. And I think it's really critical to have these discussions and to also demonstrate, particularly to the employer community, the success that it can be and the opportunities that are out there. So thank you so much for having us.
Great. And Craig, any last remarks? Because I did see that we've got a question coming in either for Megan or for Judge Russo on from Angela on having a felony OVI. Oh, there you go, Megan. Great, fantastic. You've answered that. I'm sorry, Craig, go ahead.
Oh, no, the reason we're here is to answer these questions. And so that's the important piece. Again, just reiterating support for all of this is important. Whether you are seeking a CQE, whether you are an employer, share this with others. You are the way that we can spread this message so that judges like Judge Russo can see more applicants coming through for this. And so it is on all of us to continue to share this message and preach the good news about SCORE and about CQEs to individuals that may need to know about it.
Outstanding. And Angela, please feel free to go to the link there, or visit your local legal aid society. Would be a benefit to be able to walk through that process. There you go. Thank you, Megan. A great link there. And again, panelists, thank you so much for sharing your time, your expertise, and your passion. For those attending, thank you so much. This is being recorded, it's housed, and that it's also live streaming. You'll be able to see this recording at a later date through the Central Ohio Reentry Week website. And honestly, you know what, if you've got more questions, Angela, go ahead. You can either put that in the chat, or if you've got a question you want to ask, this is exactly the time, and you've got the resources in front of you.
Thank you so much. I figured I'd just ask. It'd probably be a lot easier. I didn't want you guys to get off here before I got the chance to type it out. So I recently got my court date for my hearing to have my record sealed, because I had a couple other things from that time in my life where I had also received the OVI. And I was wondering, at that hearing, is that a time where I could also do the CQE, or is that a separate process?
Yeah, that would be a separate process. So, you know, you can certainly raise that you want to file a CQE as well, but you would have to do that through ODRC's website is where you'll start to fill out that application. But the judge won't be able to issue a CQE at your sealing hearing.
Okay, and the judge that I would go in front of, would that be the same judge that I went in front of for sentencing, or would that be a different judge?
That's a good question, Judge Russo.
No, it very well may be a different judge, particularly if that judge is no longer on the bench. It will be that judge's successor. Do you know which court you'll be in, whether it'll be municipal court or common pleas for your expungement hearing?
It's municipal for the expungement hearing, and the OVI is actually a felony because I had got so many in such a short period of time.
Sure.
And then, yeah.
The reason why I ask is because if you're in municipal court trying to expunge your misdemeanors, you file the CQE and common pleas. So that'll be a different court, different judge. But even when you're there in front of the municipal court judge, like Megan said, it never hurts, because they probably will say, I can expunge these other offenses, but this OVI, even if it wasn't a felony, it still wouldn't be an expungable just because of the nature of the offense. But it would be helpful for you to say, and for that judge to have additional information. By the way, I'm also taking the proactive step of getting a CQE on that felony conviction. Okay,
that's what I was wondering, because it's kind of hard, because the first three are municipal misdemeanors, and then the kind of made it the felony. But since coming home and doing the time that I did for the crime, I went back to school. I got a position with Columbus State. I have been elected, or I've been nominated for the Student Employee of the Year 2 years in a row. Last year, I won honorable mention, 2021 Outstanding Woman Leader Award. I was just elected Vice President of the Phi Theta Kappa Honor Society. I have
this process is right up your alley then.
I was worried because I didn't know. I've heard, so I knew, because I worked with a lady from the Legal Aid Society and Opportunity Port to get this process started with my hearing, but I was under the impression, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, once I file this, I can't go back and try to file something else in the future for the same scenario. So for the I'm worried because they said that there's possibly something that was going to pass in the future that would
I
make,
think you're talking about the expungement, because
yeah,
if you file that and that's denied, you can't just keep refiling on that. So what a lot of people will say is if you're not eligible, the court will withdraw it and take it that you've never filed that, so that you don't have to rule on, the court doesn't have to rule on it and deny it, which would prohibit you from filing it again. That I don't think is true with the CQE process. But that is true on the expungement side of things. But that's what it sounds like they were talking about. One thing I do want to give you the heads up on, and I can't give legal advice because I'm prohibited from doing that. But what I will say is on the felony OVI, the CQE cannot lift any kind of driver's license suspension that is attached to or as a consequence of the OVI. Do you understand that? And Megan or somebody can advise you further on that. But it doesn't lift that suspension. It just clears any other collateral consequence paths that prohibit you from getting employment because that felony OVI is on your record.
Yeah, so I've actually, which I'm sure you're familiar with, the habitual driver form. It was so hard to get somebody to sign that, but I actually got that done. I've taken care of all of my stipulations with the BMV, and I recently got my license. So I'm super excited about that.
Very good. It sounds like you're doing all the right things. Just continue to do it. You're doing great.
Thank you.
Well, how about that? Thank you both for sharing your expertise. Angela, thank you for raising those questions. There may have been others on the call that had maybe a similar type question. So thanks for coming forward on that. Keep persevering, one foot in front of the other. Again, thank you all so much for being here. Again, you'll find recordings at a variety of virtual or social media sites. And Caroline has put that resource folder for you. And Megan's done the URL for ODRC. Again, thank you, panelists. Thank you, attendees, for being here. And be well till we see one another next.
Thanks, everyone.